Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. Today is fight day going down in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We got UFC 301 and back-to-back flyweights here. We got another flyweight main event championship title up for grabs. We got Alexandre Pantoja defending the belt against Steve Erceg. And in our co-main event, man, it's the return of the King of Rio and Jose Aldo. We got 13 total fights. Pretty decent little pay-per-view to break down here. Let you go ahead and recap UFC Vegas 91. We'll get down to business.
Yeah, so a profitable night for both of us. You only had one straight bet on your card, and Don'Tale Mayes. It was a close fight, but being on the plus money dog in that fight was obviously the right side. You won that bet, profited a little over a unit. You also had a parlay with the under 1.5 rounds. The Austin Lane versus Jonathan Denise, that one hit with ease. And then Span versus Guskov, it was just a little bit over. You missed on that one. The Lipsky Karine Silva under 2.5 missed, but you did hit the Tim Means versus Eros Medic under 2.5. Let's see, the Petrovic versus Nia Lang. I think this was probably your best hit on the card. You had Petrovic wins in round 2 and Petrovic wins in round 3. Both those things, the round 2 almost happened, and the round 3, I'm sure that you were happy to get the plus 600 instead of the plus 340. You profited 3 units on that one alone. This one, a little bit of controversy, but I think this was obviously the play. You had Hubbard by decision at plus 260 for a half unit. That hit for a little bit over a unit as well. And then the Gabriel Benitez, Hisaire Machete under 2.5 rounds. I was on the same thing. I really thought that they were going to go a little bit harder, but both of them take damage pretty well.
Right.
You ended up profiting 1.75 units on the night. And then taking a look over at my card. So I only had one play hit, but, that's all that needed to happen. Going into this Guskov fight, I think I was down minus 4.5 units. I had 2 units on Guskov at plus 168 and then a unit on his TKO at plus 230. That turned around my night for me. I missed Ariana Lipsky straight bet, and then I also missed the Jonathan Pierce straight bet. We just talked about this a little bit before we started, and I think I'd make that Jonathan Pierce bet again. It was maybe just fight IQ problems, which I guess we've seen now in his last 2 fights.
Yeah.
But the fact that he could get to Onama's back multiple times in the fight and, still lose is kind of incredible. But it is what it is. Marnik Mann versus Ketlin Souza, fight doesn't go the distance. There was a time where Ketlin Souza put together like a 10-punch combo, and I thought the ref was about to step in, and then she just let off the gas, and that didn't get it done. And then, like I said, the Machete Benitez fight, I was on the fight doesn't go to decision in that one as well. But I still eked out with a little bit of profit with 1.16 units, and say it's a good night for the podcast when we're both in the green.
100%.
All right, so moving on to the opening fight on this card in the flyweight division, we have Alexandre Costa taking on Kevin Borjas. It looks like the line is closing in even more now. We're almost at pick'ems at this point, and I certainly see why. Kevin Borjas, his only fight in the UFC up until this point has been against Joshua Van. He did get onto the Contender Series, but in his fight with Joshua Van, he had a really good first round. You saw some pretty clean striking, but then he started to slow down. And, it's tough to tell at this point in his career if that's just an insane pace that Joshua Van was putting on, or if there are, some concerns as far as cardio-wise if he does have to work over the full 15 minutes. Where Alexandre Costa, he's just got some really tough matchmaking up until this point, man. Debuted against Amir Albazi, who's in line to fight for the title. Then he's a huge favorite over Jimmy Flick, and beating Jimmy Flick doesn't really tell you too much these days. Then immediately lined up against Steve Erceg in a decently competitive fight. I do think that Costa has a significant grappling advantage, but on the feet, I am worried that he's a little bit hittable. I think given the fights that he's lost up until this point, we might be getting a decent price tag on Costa at near evens against a pretty unproven Kevin Borjas here. I told you I'm not really a huge fan of playing Peruvian fighters. I haven't seen many high-level fighters out of that country, and I feel like for the most part on this card, they're setting up the Brazilians. So I do like Costa here. Even more so, I like the under here. I think Borjas has a lot of potential early to finish him, and I think Costa, if he gets that ground game going, he could break him late. So the under is my biggest play, and then Costa is where I lean.
Nice, man. Earlier in the week, I honestly was considering betting Alessandro Costa. My problem was I kind of capped him around that 55% range, and I just didn't feel like there was a lot of meat left on the bone sitting or any value when he was at minus 150. Now it's kind of a different discussion here as those lines close down. I think Costa has the more power in his shots here. I feel like he's just as likely to finish on the feet here, and I think there is a big grappling upside. You saw Joshua Van and Victor Diaz on the Contender Series both have success taking this guy down. He's been subbed once before on the regional scene as well. And ultimately, I think that does play a big part in Kevin Borjas' cardio kind of depleting. I think the grappling kind of gets to him. And if Alessandro Costa were to mix this in, I kind of could see a late finish like yourself. But Borjas, speaking, is a very, very good boxer. His hands seem very technical. They seem very fast. And I actually do think round one probably goes to him at a pretty decent clip. So that's kind of another reason I've been talked off wanting to lay any type of juice on Costa, just because I do think you actually might get a plus money tag next to his, next to him going into round two. So I've kind of set back on this one here, but I'm with you on the Alexander Costa side. Don't have too many thoughts about the under then. It's flyweights at the end of the day. So, but at the same time, the pace that Kevin Borjas sets in early round one, he's liable to catch him, and the cardio concerns if Costa does get him down. I see where you're coming from, so I like it. Both on the Costa side to start the night. Moving up to the 55-pound division, Ismael Bonfim taking on Vince Pichel. I know Vince Pichel is 41 years old at this point, and I know Bonfim lost to Benoit Saint Denis. You can't wave on 8 or 9 body kicks, just get ran through on the mat like that, and me be eager to lay minus 500 on you. That's just bottom line, just truth be told. But at this stage, I do like the fight for Ismael Bonfim. I think it should be a pretty easy win for him. I think his stand-up is far better. I think he's much more athletic and faster at this stage. And when I look at Vince Pichel, he's been out for almost 2 years at this time, having to fly down to Brazil. The shit online this week, engaging with people on Twitter. Just don't really know if his head's where it's supposed to be on fight week. I don't know, man. I feel like Vince Pichel, if he does win this fight, you're going to be able to cash him live at an even bigger number, because I feel like early on in this fight, it's going to lean toward Bonfim. And at the same time, Ismail's not necessarily like his brother, who's like round one or bust either and has shown cardio issues. Ismail's won plenty of decisions. He knows how to stay smart. I'm not really too interested in playing this fight. I've passed altogether, but I feel like it's pretty easy for me to come out on the Ismael Bonfim side here.
So I'd have to agree with you. You mentioned the 2-year layoff for Vince Pichel. It's not only a 2-year layoff, but it's a 2-year layoff plagued with injuries, and he's now over the 40-year mark. And, his last fight prior to that was against another aging fighter in Mark Madsen, where he lost. So really, he's not even had a win in the UFC in a little over 3 years. I'm not really sure that that's something that, I like to see at all. Ismael Bonfim, you talked about the fight with Benoit Saint Denis. I feel like this is the best gift that the UFC could possibly give him. There's not very many easy fights at 155 pounds. Yeah. But if I were to serve somebody up on a silver platter, it'd probably be 41-year-old Vince Pichel. And, I think that you're getting a decent price tag on Bonfim inside the distance. Pichel, notoriously really tough, really durable. But I do think that Ismael kind of pushes a pace, has a significant striking advantage. And if Pichel can't get his wrestling going, I don't really see how he's going to be able to withstand the type of pressure that Bonfim will put on him over the course of 15 minutes. So you're getting, like minus 135 for fight doesn't go to decision, but I don't see there being much finishing upside for Vince Pichel. So I lean more towards the Bonfim inside the distance at plus money still. And that just seems like a super good price tag on a minus 550. Yeah. So I am considering Bonfim inside the distance for this bounce back fight. And yet another situation where we're seeing a Brazilian on the Rio card getting a favorable matchup. If Ishmael doesn't finish this, I would count it as a loss. Like this is a fight where he should come back, should put his name on the map again, and kind of get his steam going again in the UFC. Let's see, going down a couple weight classes to the women's flyweight division, Dione Barbosa versus Ernesta Karashkate. Barbosa, former, I think Olympic, but former judo competitor. Ernesta, former swimmer. Both of these girls are absolutely huge for the division. I think early Barbosa is going to have quite a bit of success from what I've seen from the Ernesta side. She doesn't have a great ground game, but she does have a really good cardio. And, barring like an early low-level women's finish, I do think that I could see Ernesta start taking over late. But that would all depend on whether or not she can survive the early trouble that I think that she's likely going to put herself in against Barbosa, who is, physically a beast. I think that she could be into some trouble. So another one that I'm kind of leaning the under. You're still getting a plus money on that. But I don't really know which side it's going to come from. Like I certainly wouldn't lay minus 250 on Barbosa, but Ernesta hasn't shown me much to believe that she can stop the takedowns and the grappling of Barbosa. So I'm going to lean the under. I'm probably going to lean Barbosa inside the distance, but I could certainly see Ernesta dragging this out and getting it done, breaking her down the stretch.
Yeah, man, very, very similar thoughts here. Could never get to a minus 250 on Barbosa. It's a UFC debut. She's at a size disadvantage. I think she's at a clear disadvantage in terms of striking skill as well. But I don't think it's if she gets this fight to the mat. I think it's when she gets this fight to the mat. I feel like when she does, very potential to look that minus 250. I think, the ground game's just on a different level here. And I do think she's going to find that submission. I've already played the under 2.5 at plus 165 this week. And it was just, I think Barbosa inside the distance was plus 200. So I was able to, still kind of get both sides there at plus 165, a number that I was still happy with because I'm with you, man. Ernesta has great cardio. She's a really good striker, has really good pace and volume. And then, if Barbosa does come out here, maybe get the takedown early, adrenaline dump in front of the Brazilian crowd. Like I kind of do see where Ernesta could use that size to break her a little bit down the stretch. So I'm glad you brought that up, but see the fight very similar, man. I think Barbosa is probably going to be the one to finish this fight. I've seen round one submission at +7, +800, a little tempting as well. But man, yeah, to get plus 165 on an under here for a fight that I think is going to be fought at a pretty good pace, man, where I see some clear advantages on both sides. I'm happy that you're looking at that. I'm going to go Barbosa inside the distance by sub as well.
I'm a little surprised that you took the under 2.5 when you got the plus money fight doesn't go to decision.
I know. You got a little eager to jump the gun when I saw plus 165. I didn't know if it was going to take some action or not, so I went ahead and got on board. Moving up the card, man, Mauricio Ruffy taking on Jamie Mullarkey. Truth be told, man, I haven't liked what I've been seeing from Jamie Mullarkey lately. I don't want to say he's just completely washed, but I do think he's absolutely slowed down a whole bunch. He's a guy who's always been comfortable in the fire, being able to, be able to eat some of these shots. And here recently, just hasn't looked very good, man. I bet Jamie Mullarkey against both Michael Johnson and John McDessie, and I watched those fights back this week, and those very rarely they literally could have gone the other way. I pretty much got lucky in those. Mullarkey could have been on a bad losing streak right here, and I think he's been TKO'd 5 or 6 times out of those 7 losses. But I mean, he was dropped by Michael Johnson, even though that went to decision. He was dropped numerous times by Brad Riddell, even though that went to decision. So the guy's there to be hit, and I think Mauricio Ruffy is very, very powerful. I think he's going to sit back, counter shot like he does, land the calf kicks like he does, and Jamie is a guy who kind of comes forward, so he's gonna pull the strikes out of Mauricio Ruffy, and I think Ruffy's going to KO him in the first or second round. Truth be told, so this is one of my only straight bets this week. It's happy to get him under minus 200 because, I think he's going to look like a big favorite. I don't trust Jamie Mullarkey at this stage in his career.
Yeah. Yes, I have to agree, like, with everything that you said. Mullarkey, he's one of these guys and we'll talk about it in the next fight as well, but he's one of these guys that need a solid 15 minutes. And on top of needing a solid 15 minutes to get the fight done, he also relies on his durability, and we've seen that kind of give in his last few fights. Against Marcelo Rofi, that's not the dude that you have a large margin of error whenever you're fighting him, dude. Like he's a one-shot kill type of fighter, and I do think that he'll be that Malarkey will give him the openings to land that shot. They're not giving you great numbers. I was looking Roofy TKO round 1, and you're still looking at like plus 250. I don't love that. I think I'd rather just play late the early juice like you did at minus 190 up over minus 200. It's a little shaky, and maybe just a fight where I'm going to lean back and enjoy, because I do think that this is going to be a violent fight whichever way it goes. But I would also have to agree that Roofy's the side here. Brazilian and Rio again. I think that it's safe to lean that way. Yep. Moving up the card to same weight class, Joaquim Silva taking on Drakkar Klose. Klose, like Jamie Malarkey, he needs a clean 15 minutes, man. He's one of these fighters who's completely content at this point in his career to grind, cage push, do what it takes to win. And it's not necessarily winning in fans, but it's allowed him to stay in the UFC for quite a long time. So it's hard to knock him. He's on a 3-fight win streak right now, with his only loss, in the last 7 years or so, to Benny Dariush. And that was a really close fight that he almost finished himself. Now he's up against Joaquim Silva, who, 35 years old, had some ups and downs in the UFC, but he has lost to higher level competition and beaten the guys that I feel like he should have beaten. Drakkar Klose does kind of fall in the in-between, in my opinion, to the Nasrat Haqparast and Arman Tsarukyan. He's somewhere below them and somewhere above the Ronsons and Gordons. I just wonder how this fight's going to play out. I talked to you. I feel like the finishing sequence that I could see that gets Drakkar Klose in trouble is if Klose catches Joaquim Silva. He does tend to give up all of his defense. The technical side, he kind of throws out the window, and he'll chase a finish. And Joaquim Silva, I mean, you see it in his build. He's the type of fighter who only needs one shot to get it done. Majority of his wins are by KO. And with Drakkar Klose kind of aging, if he does get away from that grindy pace that he wants to push to get to a decision, and he chases that finish, I could certainly see him getting caught here. So I'm laying off of this fight, but I would think that Klose gets this done the majority of the time.
Yeah, I am on the Klose side as well here. Got him parlayed for a unit with Alexandre Pantoja to get plus money. I just feel like outside of landing a big shot, Drakkar Klose has Joaquim Silva covered pretty much everywhere, man. I think he's a way better offensive wrestler. He's got the way more trusted cardio. The volume's there. Like you said, the guy's 8-2 in the UFC, with the only loss in 7 years or something being to Benil, which you brought up very well. It could have gone the other way that night as well. He's just a guy that I know that I can trust, even if it does go to the scorecards, to do enough, And on the Joaquim Silva side, a little bit aging, less durable, less cardio. I don't know, man. I watching weigh-ins, he looks like an absolute brick shit house, but the skill set, I think, is very inferior to Drakkar Klose in the cage. And he's got the big cage Drakkar does as well. It's not like he's going to be forced in a small cage with someone with this power. Be able to dance around, land his kicks, maybe even find some top time. I like Drakkar Klose. Ended up getting him at minus 185. Was pretty happy with that. That's the side that I come out on pretty clearly in this one.
Here's another thing. If you did want to play Joaquim Silva, you could get his finish only, scorecards no action, still at plus money. And I do think that there's a lot of potential for him to get the finish, where otherwise I think that Klose kind of, like you said, just outclasses him over the course of 15 minutes. So that'd be the safer way to play Joaquim Silva if you were looking at that side. I think we both are going with Klose here.
Yes, sir. A really good fight at 155 pounds. A lot of people liking this one this week, myself included. Elvis Brenner taking on Mick Tebek, oral buy. Anybody betting on Elvis Brenner, like I kind of get it. The dude is a dog, and it's a great price to back him at. But I just feel like skill set wise, what Oralby showed me in his debut, I think he's got Elvis Brenner I think he's got him covered, man. Oralby, the shots he took from Medic up at 170, I mean, he was eating them clean, not even barely reacting. He looks extremely durable. The pressure, the takedowns, relentless, man. You know, he's an excellent finisher as well. Finished 11 of his 12 wins. Some of these coming on the feet as well. I think he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. This is the first time going back down to 55 for the first time for a little bit. He's fought there before, but I think the last 3 or 4 fights have been at welterweight for him. So I, curious to see if the traveling to Brazil, the extra weight, is it going to make Elvis Brenner live in round 3 if he's still there? I don't know. That's a bit of a question to me. But from what I've seen from Miktabek Oralby, he looks like a pretty solid prospect, somebody that is probably going to look to take him to the mat to try to cover that price tag. So I'm on the Miktabek Oralby side. I just feel like as durable as Elvis Brenner is, if you let him hang around, you're kind of playing with fire. So I'm excited about this one, but I'm going to go Oralby for a pretty dominant decision, 6 or 7 takedowns throughout the fight, some ground and pound, just to do enough here, man.
Yeah, so I agree. I just watched back the Guram fight, and that's like an all-timer, man. Like, it's a really fun fight to watch for sure. That being said, you look at Elvis Brenner's career up until this point. He comes in his first fight against Zubair Tukhugov at a plus 470. Then he comes in against Guram Kutateladze at a plus 475. Finally, he's the favorite in his last fight. He covered his price tag. And I do feel like at this point, facing somebody in Oralby who's, from everything that I can see, is the real deal, I do think that you're getting a, if you got in on that early line on Oralby, that was a huge pickup. But I do think that there's a lot of finishing potential for Oralby. Get him to the ground. Like you said, I think he's going to be physically just so much more dominant. And where Guram Kutateladze doesn't really rely on his grappling, I feel like had he mixed in his grappling in the times where he had Brenner hurt, he might have could have finished his fight as well. And I think that that's something that Oralby will be willing to do. I like Oralby. I don't love the minus 250, but if he were to get it done, I expect him to get it done by submission. We've seen Brenner take a lot of damage, and you can get Oralby submission at plus 550. Plus 550 Oralby decision. I think that that's probably the move here. I'd much rather lay a half a unit on that than lay 2.5 units to win back 1 on his money line. Yeah. Now, while Elvis Brenner has shown us that he's super, super durable, I do think that this is maybe not a step up in competition, but a step up in skill set where Oralby is completely well-rounded. He's going to rely on his ground game more. I think that it was just a stylistic matchup against Kutateladze that benefited Brenner, who can take a lot of damage on the feet. Yeah. He hasn't ever been submitted before, so that's something I am a little weary of. Oralby not being able to finish it, but I'm not sure that he's faced anybody quite the size of Oralby or the skill set of him. There's still some unanswered questions from Miktabek, but I do think that this will probably be his breakout fight. And, Oralby by decision or by submission plus 550 is how I'll probably play it. But your read on the decision, that's also very, very likely. So I don't hate that as well. Let's see. Moving up the card, we get to women's strawweight. Karolina Kovacevic taking on Yasmin Lucindo. There's like a 14 or 16 year age gap right here. Feel like Lucindo has Karolina covered in a lot of spots: athleticism, youth, finish ability. All those, it leans towards Lucindo's favor, but I really haven't seen Lucindo earn this type of price tag against anybody in the UFC. She's still got a lot to prove at her young age. She hasn't really done it against the best level of competition, and now you're having to lay a minus 400. I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're talking about unranked women's strawweight fighters, and you're laying minus 400 on one of them. Like something's not adding up. Carolina, she has looked decent in her last few fights, but her body language whenever she gets hit, it's not something you like to see. I do think that Yasmin has the power to kind of make her fold if she can continue the pressure on Kovacevic, but I think that there's probably value on Carolina by decision. She could give her the old vet lesson, and I really do think that there's potential for that. But outside of that, I think Lucindo, if she's going to cover this price tag, she's going to have to do it inside the distance. And I think that there'll be potential for her. So Lucindo plus 400 by TKO, or just the inside the distance at like plus 200, plus 180. I think that that's probably how I'd lean this fight. So yeah, and I don't know the stats, but I'm sure they're absolutely ridiculous. And with a 15-year age gap, what the younger fighter win percentage is. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and on top of all that, Brazilian and Rio. So give me Yasmin Lucindo here.
I was trying to do a little bit of digging when I saw the age gap of 16 years as well. I think Royce Gracie fought somebody there was a bigger age gap in his fight, but in the modern era of MMA, from what I can find, this is the biggest age gap between fighters that we've seen. Yasmin, I'm 100% with you, man. Done nothing to deserve this price tag whatsoever. Would never touch this big juice in women's MMA. I considered maybe looking at the under, but Carolina's she's a tough girl, man, and a lot of the women that Lucindo has finished, it's kind of low level, truth be told. The Poly one is the best finish on her record by a mile, but I do think she holds 90% of the finishing upside, if not more, in this fight here. I really don't see a world where Carolina finishes the fight. So chasing a decision prop on her, likely the best value of anything in this fight, truth be told. But it's hard for me to see her stealing one in Brazil when the harder shots are going to be coming from Lucindo, when the grappling upside could be coming from Lucindo, just the youth, athleticism, all. So I'm on Yasmin Lucindo as well, but this fight altogether ultimately has been a big pass for me. Prelim main event, 145 pounds. We got Joe Anderson Brito taking on the return of Jack Shore. This is one of the tougher fights for me to call on the card, man. I'm not a big fan of the layoff for Jack Shore, and truth be told, I'm not really a fan of him at featherweight. I think a lot of his game relied on being the bigger, stronger grappler down at 135, and I liked him there. And also you could argue after watching the JSP fight, the Bill Algeo fight, like this is this type of style that Joe Anderson Brito kind of struggles with. Someone who has really good jiu-jitsu, really good control, who can take his athletic ass down and neutralize him, But that's really all Shore has to his game. On the feet, I think the gap on the feet is likely way bigger than the gap on the ground. I feel like Joe Anderson Brito carries way more power. He's way more comfortable in the pocket, much more fast and athletic. I don't know. I feel like the finish upside clearly favors Joe Anderson Brito. So I've had a tough time looking at this fight here because if Jack Shore comes out here, gets his grappling going, I don't think he's going to look like the underdog at all, but I also do think there's a world where Brito's just too fast, too athletic for him, keeps his fight on the feet, and lands a way more damaging shots, potentially finishing Jack Shore. So I'm going to go Joe Anderson Brito. No bet on this fight for me, though, man.
This is probably a layoff spot for me as well. I do think that Brito's win conditions are inside the distance. You talked about him maybe being able to keep it on the feet and just being a little bit too athletic for him, but I really think that the finishing potential is there for Brito, just strictly because of his explosiveness, and I think that he relies on it a lot. The odds, they opened up like, I'm pretty sure evens, maybe even Jack Shore minus 120, a slight favorite. So you can get a decision only on Jack Shore at minus 115. And although you're giving up like 50 points off of his money line, I think that that's kind of his win conditions. And if it doesn't get to those scorecards, I certainly think that Brito will be the one who picks up the inside the distance win. Yep. So I actually almost picked him for our fantasy league whenever they had originally opened and it was pick'ems. I favored Jack Shore, but now I'm getting the decision only at the same price tag as his opening line. And I think that if I were going to play this fight, it would have to be Jack Shore decision only. So that's a look. But again, I think I have to lean with you, and this is a fight that I'll probably lay off. I don't love going against Brazilians in Rio. I don't know how many times I'm going to repeat it here, but that's just is what it is. I don't really love it. And generally speaking, historically speaking, Northern European wrestlers don't do great in the UFC, and that's something that Jack Shore relies on. So pass for me. If I am going to play it, if I talk myself into it, it's Shore, decision only. So who am I picking? I think I'll pick Shore. I pick Shore for this fight, but
Gotcha.
I don't think I'm going to get there money line wise.
Just to add one thing here, a fight here that really kind of made me lean toward the Brito side and even maybe by decision was his win over Contender Series over Diego Lopez, or Lopes, however you say it. That's a win that's aged very, very well. Somebody that I think is much more dangerous with the grappling than Jack Shore is, and he was able to literally ground him for 2 rounds and stay on top and stay safe. So I think there's a world where Brito, even, like I said, finds his way on top, maybe just steals a decision here with top time. So it's a tricky fight for me to clearly get a read on, because I feel like he's got the power on the feet, but he could just land on top of Jack Shore and ride out rounds too after watching that fight. So be on the opposite side of you here, but I think ultimately none of us might not have any action on it.
Moving on to the main card opener for this pay-per-view. Pretty exciting fight, man. 185 pounds, Paul Craig taking on Caio Borralho. Paul Craig, he moved down to the 185-pound weight class 2 fights ago. He's gone 1-1. The Muniz win, that was a pretty huge pickup. The Brendan Allen loss, it's honestly kind of aging well. Brendan Allen, he's got a lot of potential in the division, and outside of his defense, I think that he's a pretty serviceable fighter, man. Like, he's actually pretty good. Caio Borralho, he's someone who relies a lot on his ground game, and he's fighting somebody in Paul Craig that can only win this fight if it stays on the ground. Now, I heard Paul Craig talking about it in his fighter interviews this week, that he's really been working on his stand-up, and he thinks that because both these guys are ground specialists, that he thinks it'll kind of negate, and this will be a stand-up fight, and he's looking forward to it. But truthfully, I think that Caio's just a little bit more athletic. He has a little bit cleaner strikes. Paul Craig, he does some stupid stuff on the feet because he has forgiveness if the fight does go to the ground. So he's willing to throw these spinning back kicks and stuff like that, which don't look great. But at 185 pounds, it's kind of hard to gauge where he is, because the loss over Brendan Allen doesn't tell me too much, man. He was able to drag that fight out to the 3rd round, and that's kind of like a moral victory if I'm in Paul Craig's head. I don't think that Borralho covers -600 by any means. I really don't. But I also not really fond of playing Paul Craig. I've played his submissions before, and like 1,100 is kind of crazy. Plus 1,100 Paul Craig submission is kind of crazy when you think that that's the only way that he wins this fight. He's not going to win a decision. He's not going to knock him out. Plus 1,100, it seems like a must. Maybe I'll put 0.1 unit on it, and just hope for the best. So yeah, I'm going to take Borralho. I just don't think that there's any way in hell that he covers -600. So
-680 on DraftKings right now. It's pretty stupid. I've kind of been looking at that line all week, thinking there's not much I can do with it, waiting on props to come out. And I think this might be the last play that I add to my card this week, as I'm looking at the under 2.5 here. Paul Craig in 25 fights, it's only seen the distance one time. Down at 185, a guy who is already kind of not the most durable guy, I think takes a little bit more. How do I put it? I think his durability is maybe not even, you're cutting more weight. So I can't think it's better than it was at 205 here. And if he's going to win the fight, Paul Craig's going to win inside the distance. He's never won a decision in his life. So that's sitting at -145 here. I do think Caio Borralho likely will get the finish on the feet. I think if he's smart at all, which from what I can tell from Caio Borralho is he's been a pretty cerebral fighter so far throughout the UFC throughout his UFC tenure. And if he is, I think he keeps his fight on the feet. He's got that bouncing in and out karate style. And I think he's going to land on Paul Craig's chin, probably in round 2, I'm going to say. I think he's going to get in there, download his reads, eventually be willing to throw a little bit more in the pocket with Paul Craig and land a knockout blow. So I'm looking at the under 2.5 here at minus 145 to try to bring that minus 600, 680 down, and also have the Paul Craig side who never won a decision in his life. So that's the play I'm looking at here on this fight, probably the last one to add to my card before the fight starts this afternoon. Moving up to 185, or staying at 185, Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. Potieria trying to play spoiler in Brazil again, man. Went down there, knocked out Shogun as an underdog, I believe. He's a guy who's got good pressure. He's got pretty solid boxing, truth be told, and early in fights, he's pretty dangerous. My concern was him not making weight. It was a fight that he kind of took on short notice, had to fly to Brazil. To my knowledge, he made weight this week, though, so good for him. But I do think he's a bit fraudulent, and I think after round 1, the guy's finishing potential diminishes drastically. Skill set for skill set, man. Michel Pereira's probably the side. I feel like he's a better grappler. I feel like he's much more athletic and quick with his strikes. What is he lined at? Let me look. Minus 640, like that. If you had to pick anybody on the card that I think is not worthy of the price tag, somebody who could fuck around and drop the ball, I think it's Michel Pereira, truth be told, man. I don't know. He's already got 11 losses as it is. He knows how to lose. I think Ihor has bigger power. We're looking at a guy who used to fight at 170 versus a guy who used to fight at 205. So I feel like maybe tonight Ihor might be a little bit bigger in the cage. I don't know. I would never lay minus 600 on Michel Pereira ever in a fight. That's just how I feel about him. I think Ihor could be a little bit live in round 1. So I don't know. I feel like that minus 600 is going to come down after round 1 if you want to try to get on Michel live at any point. He's going to be the side for me. I think he's going to get a stoppage in 2 or 3, but not without it maybe being hairy in round 1, man. I don't know. Not too confident on this fight. I'm going to pick Michel Pereira. So far past, though.
Yeah, when you were breaking it down, you said Ihor Potieria maybe a little fraudulent, and man, I was thinking about saying that exact line for Michel Pereira. Like he's just somebody. Like you said, it's like how could you trust him here? Yeah, he's looked great in his last 2 fights, but we're talking about not minute-long finishes. We're not seeing fights getting played out for an extended amount of time. And he's always been somebody who I've had issues with his cardio. Now, maybe that was, prior to him realizing that he can't do flips coming into the cage and waste all this extra energy. And maybe he's gotten that down pat. But truthfully, like you look at the type of fighters that he's fighting, Zalim Imadaev, Chaos Williams, Nico Price, Fielho, Ponzinibbio. Those are all guys that are either not in the UFC anymore or on the biggest downswings of their career. And he's going to split with Ponzinibbio. He's going to decision with Fialho, who we just have seen, get completely pieced up
4 times in a row.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not much that has given Michel Pereira this type of price tag. He's tried to go to 170 and it's just not working. So now he even though he was a huge 170 pounder, he's not a massive 185er. He's big, right. But it's not something that Ihor Potieria hasn't seen before. And early, like you said, Potieria has a lot of finishing potential. He is dangerous, if anything. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's the best MMA fighter, but this is a game of inches, and there's not a lot of margin for error when you get up 185 and above. Like you're subject to get completely flatlined at any point in time. And I think that there is value, if you will, on Ihor Potieria here. If I was going to play this fight, I'd probably just throw a unit that plus 475. I'd probably say this once a week, but I've certainly played worse.
Yeah.
Plus 400s or better. So, I like Ihor Potieria at his current number. And Michel Pereira, even if he gets this win, I think that he'll be an automatic fade in his next fight because he'll probably be overpriced again.
Okay.
Moving up the card to the light heavyweight division, Anthony Smith taking on Vitor Petrino. Dude, Vitor Petrino on the scales. I just watched the weigh-ins before we got on here. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, if you were sculpting a 205-pound fighter, you'd probably give him Petrino's build. Anthony Smith, on the other hand, he's after this one, he'll have 20 losses on his record, and I don't think that he's looked any less built in his career. I mean, it literally doesn't look like he's worked out for this fight, and it's kind of wild when you think about him being on the commentary booth and being a fighter who probably has the privilege to choose and pick his fights. What the fuck is he doing here? Like why pick Petrino? I'm not sure. And the fact that Petrino now has 2 decision wins in the UFC, I mean, he's answered the cardio concerns that I kind of had for him with the build that he has.
Right.
And I think he's going to punish Anthony Smith here, man. Anthony Smith coming off of a knockout loss. I think Petrino inside the distance is probably the play. You can get that at -135, and that seems a whole lot better than -450. I think he's the side. I think he finds the finish, and I think Anthony Smith should hang him up after this. Brazilian in Rio. Give me Victor Petrino.
I'm on the Vitor Petrino side as well. He's somebody I actually have in our fantasy league. I had him every quarter last year as well. Got him again this year. My only concern, the submission for Lionheart. I feel like Lionheart's sub or bust here, and he needs to sell out for these positions, or he's playing with fire, man, on the feet. When I watch back Vitor Petrino fights, the Bellato fight on the Contender Series, the Turcali fight, first fight in the UFC, both of these guys land takedowns. Turcali, even at one time, does get the back of Vitor Petrino. And I do feel like if Anthony Smith were to pull this out, it's going to be by somehow getting the back and getting the rear naked choke. If he does not do that, the form that I've seen him in lately doesn't look good. The guy looks like he's slowing down. It looks like the fights and miles and damage have really caught up to him. He's now been finished 15 times in his career. So I do feel like Vitor Petrino has the 100% ability to finish him on the feet, or to do what everybody does, just take Anthony Smith down. The guy's takedown defense is shit. He's happy to play off his back. And I feel like if Vitor just gets on top, I feel like he's going to land a ton of ground and pound and maybe finish it by ground and pound stoppage. So I am with you. I'm going to go ahead and chalk this up as an Anthony Smith 20th loss on the Vitor Petrino side here, man.
Okay, so between Paul Craig submission prop at +1100 over Baralho, or Anthony Smith submission prop at +1400 over Petrino, which one do you lean towards?
Fuck, man, that's hard.
I know.
I feel like Kyle Baralho has shown me a pretty cerebral fighter, whereas I have seen Vitor have his back by somebody that I think could be inferior to Anthony Smith. So I think 1400 Anthony Smith submission probably be a better play.
I think I might agree. I think I'm agreeing with you.
Co-main events, a return of the King of Rio, Jose Aldo, coming back here, taking on Jonathan Martinez. Earlier in the week, I wasn't really considering bet Jonathan Martinez, but when all the line movement came in, I kind of understood where the people were coming from, because it's a great spot to attack. You've had a guy in Jose Aldo who's been on the shelf for 2 years, and a guy in Jonathan Martinez who's looked career best, 6 wins in a row. He comes from a great camp, nasty kicks, nasty knees. But I don't know, man. The Jose Aldo that I saw show up on weigh-ins didn't look washed whatsoever. And I feel like Jonathan Martinez's win over Adrian Yanez really has people hyped to bet him, I think. He looked career best there, but I couldn't think it's more of a different matchup here. Yanez is super heavy on the front leg, just a primary boxer. And looking back, I told you that was probably your best bet that I could think of in a long time. looking back, it was a great style for Jonathan Martinez. Like I said, a guy who's heavy on the lead leg, stationary boxer. For someone as good as Jonathan Martinez is with his kicks at range, it's a great matchup for him here. With Aldo, man, I don't get that vibe. I feel like Aldo is great at checking kicks. He's way more mobile, has way better lateral movement than Adrian Yanez. And if these guys do get into any pocket boxing exchanges, I like Jose Aldo there a whole lot. I think Jose Aldo is primed to land a couple takedowns here. And I love the body work for Jose Aldo. The guy is constantly going to the body with his boxing. And, Martinez is a guy who's shown weakness to the body before and also shown chin issues. I look at that Davy Grant knockout. It's set up by a body shot first. And so, I feel like Jose Aldo goes out here, works the body a little bit. It's going to open up his shots up top. At the end of the day, man, I ended up getting plus 130 on the King of Rio de Janeiro in Rio de Janeiro. If it's close, I feel like they're going to gift him the decision. That's just my honest opinion, If these rounds are close, I think they're going to give them to Jose Aldo. He's a guy who's an absolute legend of the sport, considered the featherweight GOAT by many, and I think you went out losing to Merab, a great title challenger, incredible pace. Max Holloway, incredible pace that you can set. Peter Yan, incredible pace in a 5-round fight. Jonathan Martinez doesn't bring that, So if he's stationary there with Jose Aldo, I think a lot of these rounds are going to swing in the favor of Jose Aldo here in Rio de Janeiro. So happy to try to get what I also think is a great spot, them trying to set him up with a win to ride off in the sunset in Rio de Janeiro. So give me Jose Aldo this week, man.
Yeah, I'm going to overlook the Marlon Moraes split decision loss, but going over his last losses, it's Conor McGregor, Max Holloway, Volkanovski, Jan, Davishvili. Is Jonathan Martinez even close to any of those names? And to be honest with you, this is, let's see. In 2022 was Jose Aldo's last fight against Merab Davishvili, and he fought him well. He defended however many takedowns, fought him well, and now we're getting post-USADA. Jose Aldo, if anybody, I feel like, they're setting him up in Brazil on this co-main. The UFC now with this third-party testing, they know what's being tested, what's not. Why wouldn't they let Jose Aldo know what's okay to take now? And why wouldn't Jose Aldo go out on his high horse with, the most juice possible? What's it matter, dude? He wants to get this win. He wants to ride off into the sunset, and I don't blame him, dude. I feel like I couldn't agree more. In a game of leg kicks, I'd certainly feel like I'd take Jose Aldo over Jonathan Martinez. Martinez has got some pretty incredible finishes, but I'm just not sure it's against the same caliber of competition that Aldo's been facing over the past decade. And
zero with even though there are 2 leg kicks and 2 knees, not knocked anybody out with his hands in the UFC yet.
I have to agree with you. I think it's a setup fight for Jose Aldo. And the fact that he didn't look, washed against Merab Davishvili, who's about to fight for the title next, I do think that this is a great opportunity to get him at plus money for his last fight. Give me Jose Aldo in 2024, which is weird to say,
Like it.
Moving on to the main event, the flyweight championship between Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Erceg, my dad watches the fights with us just about every weekend, and he does not know Steve Erceg. It was quite a surprise whenever he got called up. But looking at the division, you can understand where the UFC is coming from, pushing for this fight. That being said, this is maybe the largest step up in competition that I've seen in a really long time. Going from Matt Schnell to Alexandre Pantoja, that's an insane jump that nobody should have to do, but that's what's happening right now. I do think that Erceg has a little bit more technical striking, a little bit cleaner striking, but I feel like Pantoja is just so proven, especially over 5 rounds, that it's really tough to doubt him in what I would consider his prime, like let's see, how old is he? He's
I think it's like
34. So he's getting up there, but I haven't really seen any signs of him slowing down. If anything, it's like he's able to pull this dog out of him whenever fights go deep that I haven't necessarily seen out of Erceg. Erceg, up until this point, he's looked great. Like, I totally understand where the love is coming on the Astro Boy side, but the level of competition hasn't really shown me much. Like, David Dvorak, I think he's since out of the UFC. Costa, still some unanswered questions for him. And then Schnell, we knew he had an awful chin, and I think the UFC knew it as well. That's why they made that fight. Pantoja doesn't have an awful chin. He will push an insane pace. And if he gets it to the ground, I think that he absolutely washes Erceg. We've seen Erceg scramble out of a few things and look good in defending that. But it's not Alexandre Pantoja that we're talking about, you know? I think the control of Pantoja is going to be something that Erceg hasn't even felt a quarter of up until this point in his career. And the line continues to go down. I'm really hoping I can hold out to like 3 o'clock today and find Pantoja, minus 170, something like that. That would be very interesting, probably something that I'm going to be on. I think the under is also pretty decent. Like, if Pantoja can't get him to the ground and Erceg does start working him on the feet, I think that there will be finishing potential for Erceg. He's just so crisp that I think that he could probably, over the course of 5 rounds, given 5 rounds, he can probably land clean enough shots to knock out Pantoja. But Pantoja, I don't even know if he's ever been finished. Let's see. No, he's never been finished. So it's tough to say that he's going to get knocked out. But if Erceg does avoid the ground, I could see him drawing out this fight. And we've seen Pantoja slow down. And even though he's able to dig deep, he does kind of expose himself with his striking whenever he does get tired. And that's where I think Erceg could capitalize. So overall, I think the under 4.5 fight doesn't go to decision. That's probably where I'm leaning. But I'm also leaning the Pantoja side. I think it's much more likely that he gets on the ground and starts working Erceg before Erceg is able to catch him on the feet.
Yeah, man, I was very happy to continue to see all this Erceg money coming in. I did play Pantoja at minus 185, and I've been monitoring that line all week. So I told you I would be very comfortable to drop 3 units if this hits a minus 170, minus 175 range. I've seen Erceg have super close rounds with David Dvorak. I've seen him be 1-1 going into the 3rd round with Alessandro Costa and have to use the clinch to be able to win the 3rd round. I don't think you want to clinch with Pantoja or you're probably going to get taken down. And then, the win over Matt Schnell, it's not even like the chinniest guy in the flyweight division. It's like maybe one of the chinniest guys in the UFC history, man, and then now
it's like
you're
him and James
Vick. For real, right? And now you're supposed to compete with Pantoja. I don't get it, man. He's got really good boxing. He's really technical with it. But I haven't seen anything from his grappling to show me that he can compete with Pantoja. I haven't seen anything from his cardio to tell me that he can go hard 5 rounds. I've seen Pantoja win round 5 against Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval, guys who I know have 5-round cardio, So to be able to back a champion that I know can go out there and win championship rounds, who can potentially exploit a ground game, somebody who's never been finished before, it was a very easy play for me to get on the Pantoja side here. I feel like Steve Erceg is not going to finish him. I feel like his path to victory is to outbox him for 5 rounds. And you're in Rio de Janeiro. You're really going to have to run away with it to steal these rounds. So I'm on the Pantoja side pretty clearly here. And if by 3 p.m., if we can get 170, 175, I will unleash some more units on the Pantoja side. So happy to hear you agree with me, man. I think we hear and still later on this evening. All 13 fights going through for UFC 301. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Make sure to do us a favor, like, subscribe to the channel, help you boys out a little bit. Excited for the fights tonight. And as always, we'll be back here next week to talk next set of fights. You guys take it easy.